This song does an absolutely perfect job at making you feel that emotion, that anger, that frustration. It's the perfect rebel song. It's got an amazing story behind it. The Patriot Game, written by the famous Dominic Behan. Released in 1958, it is framed around the first-person perspective of a Fergal O'Hanlon, a real-life IRA volunteer from Monaghan Town. The song itself has a great story buried in it, and a bit of controversy as well. Did Bob Dylan actually plagiarise the song to write his own? I'll let you be the judge of that. So the song itself, as I said, is framed around this first-person view of a Fergal O'Hanlon, who he said was an IRA lad. I personally love the opening lines of this song. It's even making me feel a bit rebellious already, like, "Come all ye young rebels and list while I sing. For love of one's land is a terrible thing." You imagine back then the anger that people felt, the strong beliefs of a large portion of that population. This song opens with such a strong line that hits that very nerve, that being proud of your country is a terrible thing. I think it's one of the most perfect examples of how strong a writer Dominic Behan was. I actually think as well that we could incite another rebellion if we do our own version of the song today. "Come all ye young rebels and list while I sing. For the love of cheap rent and a pint under a fiver, and reasonably priced petrol is a terrible thing." We can only dream. But joking aside, Fergal was a real person. He was born in Monaghan, which is right on the border there between the north of Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. The song says that he was 16, and that it was barely 2 years since he joined the IRA. But why the need for the IRA in the first place, and what was the crack in Ireland back then? Well, the fighting that kicked off between the 1940s and 1960s was all down to the IRA's long-standing obsession with ending the partition of Ireland. That line in the sand drawn by the 1922 Anglo-Irish Treaty. At the start, the lads wanted to take down both Northern Ireland and the Irish Free State, because in their eyes, both were just illegitimate setups forced on us by the British. And at the end of the song though, we know that Fergal dies. However, the real Fergal was 20 years old. He was nearly 21 years old when he was killed. So does the younger age make this song hit even harder? In a way it does. I think it does. It shows an image of essentially a 14-year-old joining the IRA to fight and being killed when he was 16. This isn't uncommon as well with a lot of rebel songs. The point is to trigger an emotion with the listener, and reshaping Fergal as a younger lad, in my opinion, definitely helps hit that nerve a little bit easier. It's more shocking. Whether that was Dominic's intention or not, to me it doesn't really matter. Whether Fergal himself wasn't 16 or not, the reality is that many unknown younger kids had died throughout those years for various reasons, so it doesn't make that struggle any less real. But how did Fergal die? He was killed on January 1st, 1957, during an IRA raid on the Royal Ulster Constabulary Barracks in Brookeborough, County Fermanagh, an operation in which fellow volunteer Sean South also lost his life, who another great song was written about as well, Sean South of Garryowen. But that raid, there's a few interesting things to know about it. It was carried out on the 1st of January 1957, as we mentioned. It was the day that Fergal had died. It was considered the most dramatic attack of the IRA's border campaign for several reasons. They actually attacked the wrong building as well to begin with. A 14-man IRA column led by Sean Garland had intended to attack a joint RUC and B Specials barracks in County Fermanagh, but completely mixed it up and attacked the wrong one. Now, I couldn't find what building it was mixed up with, but it was probably just a different section of the barracks. That's just my guess there though. Not only was there a major tactical error with the building, the fighting was brief too. They were heavily armed, had a load of grenades and firebombs on them, but the fighting only lasted about 10 minutes. After the fighting was done, the IRA lads were hunted down. Injured and all, the surviving men tried to escape back across the border, but were being hunted by 400 RUC officers, B Specials and British soldiers. This retreat was where the 20-year-old Fergal O'Hanlon and Sean South had died from their wounds sustained in the fighting. The deaths of Sean and Fergal in particular triggered an emotional reaction amongst the public in the Republic of Ireland. They became martyrs, and around 50,000 people attended the funerals. The events inspired many songs to be written. These two included and remembered to this day. There's a physical memorial dedicated to both Sean South and Fergal O'Hanlon located at Altawalk Cross in Fermanagh, which you can still visit. Sadly, it's also a spot where vandalism seems to occur more than once, similar to the Luke Kelly statues in Dublin. Now, Dominic Behan will have a little talk about himself and the famous Behan family soon, but the song, the melody, how was it written? He wrote the lyrics, and they're amazing lyrics at that. Impossible not to have vivid imagery listening to them. He didn't compose the original melody. As with a ton of folk songs, not only Irish, the tune was borrowed from an older tune called One Morning in May, or The Nightingale. According to the folk indexes as well, it also goes by the name The Bold Grenadier and The Merry Month of May. So the melody at least has been there for a good while. But these older songs, combined with the Patriot Game, creates a little layer of irony. The English folk songs revolve around a romantic encounter between a soldier and a young lady walking down by a stream to hear the nightingale sing. The soldier, fair dues to him, he whips out his fiddle and plays her a tune. She's loving the tune now as well, so she is. So she turns around and asks him to marry him. But the sneaky fecker tells her that he already has a wife at home. Bad form. But compare that to the Patriot Game, a young IRA volunteer dying in a fight against British forces, set to the same melody as a cheeky British soldier's romantic exploits. Pure brilliant. But now, here's where we get on to the bit about Bob Dylan. Did he plagiarise it from Behan? Tell me what you think about it though. From what I read, there's a fair bit of debate for and against it, understandably as well. But have a listen to both of them here and tell me what you think.
And it makes us all part of the Patriot Game. And that the land that I live in has got on its side.
Now, I obviously can't be going and playing the entire song, or the video will unfortunately get flagged for copyright, and I'll get into a little bit of trouble there. So I'm just going to leave the links in the description so you listen to the full songs. But it's undoubtedly the same melody, which is fair because the melody, as we said, has been going around for ages. So for that reason, it's not fair to say that Bob Dylan had plagiarised it because, sure, you know, it's a traditional folk tune. Behan did the same thing, of course. But where it gets complicated is the lyrics and the framework. That for what Behan did for Fergal O'Hanlon fighting with the IRA for the reasons that we mentioned earlier, Bob Dylan's lyrics do a similar thing for the American people. I'm not really familiar with Bob Dylan's song now. I didn't go investigating it that much, and I only have a very basic understanding of American history. But from what I can see in the songs, they open with a similar narrative, and each verse as well ends in a similar fashion. Part of the Patriot Game and God on their side. And it's repeated. It's hard to say exactly, of course. It's absolutely open for debate. I would say though that, look, you know, you can't argue about using that melody. That's fair game. But it gets a bit questionable when the theme and the framework and the narrative combined are also a little bit similar. That it could be safe to say that Bob Dylan did take some inspiration from Dominic Behan's Patriot Game. But please do let us all know what you think about it down in the comments. But Dominic Behan anyway, and the Behan family, a huge part of Irish folk music for many reasons, a family of excellent writers at the time. Dominic was born in Dublin on October 22nd, 1928. The Behan family were your usual educated working class family, immersed in Irish Republican politics and literature. Stephen Behan was his father, and he himself fought with the IRA in the Irish War of Independence. Kathleen Behan, his mother, was a politically active collector of songs and stories who frequently took her kids on literary tours of the city. As well as that, Dominic Behan's uncle, Patrick Carney, wrote a soldier song, the basis of the Irish national anthem. So arguably one of, if not the most important family when it comes to the music of Ireland. It's worth mentioning as well that Dominic had a number of hugely popular songs written. I'm going to throw them up here on the screen somewhere, and as well I'll leave the links down in the description below. But yeah, he was one of several children. One to mention real quick, which I'm sure you know, Brendan Behan, who had also written the song The Owl Triangle. But Dominic left school at the age of 13 to work as a house painter, following in his father's footsteps. Around the same time, the family packed up and moved to Crumlin. He joined the ranks of the Fianna Éireann. These were the IRA's youth wing. And this was the spot where he first started getting his poems and prose out there for the world to see. His strong beliefs and his commitment to the working man ended up getting him into a wee bit of trouble there with the law in Dublin in 1952. He ended up getting himself jailed for heading up a civil disobedience campaign, which was a protest against the government because they weren't doing a tap about the high unemployment or the way the working class were being treated at the time. Hang on, what year is it now? That sounds very familiar. But I won't go into too much more detail about what he did really in general, because he truly did have an up and down life. There's so much to talk about, but he lived until he was 60 years old and he had died of pancreatic cancer in the end. So truly awful. My father-in-law went the same way, and yeah, it's rough. Cancer fucking sucks. But I hope that section gave a little bit more insight about Dominic Behan. But you can imagine how all of that was channeled into his writing and his writing of the Patriot Game. But real quick as well, as great as they were, the Clancy Brothers, they had admitted one time in an interview that they do go and change the songs to suit their audience. Because rightly said, if you don't have an audience, you're not really a performer, an entertainer. You're not a band, in their case.
Well, of course, all music is like language. It's a changing, living thing, and it keeps sort of evolving and changing and adapting to its new environment. Well, and we did that with folk music. And one of the factors involved was the fact that we started in America. And when we got up to sing some of our Irish songs, we realized that Americans wouldn't understand half what we were saying. The same as some of the Scots songs. I mean, they're not immediately understandable to people outside Scotland. So we just changed them to make them understood by our audience. And I think the fact that we had been in theatre taught us the lesson that if your audience do not understand you, you're a dead duck no matter what you're doing.
Exactly, that's true.
But they had changed the lyrics in this song and omitted some politically sensitive verses from the recordings. And while I do understand the Clancy Brothers' point, I wouldn't be performing a song and changing the lyrics or leaving bits out, especially when it's so closely linked with history. You may as well just write a whole new song on the back of that melody. But back to the song anyway, the middle verses. Connolly being shot, why is De Valera to blame? John Bull, the war lackey police force. What does all of this mean? Well, the line for a start, they told me how Connolly was shot in the chair. This kind of starts it all off. Connolly was a leader of the 1916 Rising and he was severely wounded afterwards. When he was executed as well, he couldn't stand up. So he was tied to a chair and executed. It's truly gruesome. But connected to the previous verse where he taught all his life that cruel England was to blame, this is part of that, along with the 6 counties taken from the rest of Ireland, John Bull's monarchy. And John Bull here is like the British Uncle Sam, the personification of England. But throughout Fergal's life, the song is saying that he was just raised to be aware of all of these things. But these were the few verses that echoed that. The need to fight for your country was growing over such a long time for Fergal O'Hanlon. But the bit where De Valera is greatly to blame, what's that all about? And still, De Valera is greatly to blame for shirking his part in the Patriot Game. De Valera was an early Republican leader who opposed the Anglo-Irish Treaty. He eventually formed Fianna Fáil, but once he was in power, he took strict action against the IRA, banning the organisation in 1936. Most importantly for this song, during the 1950s border campaign, the conflict in which Fergal O'Hanlon died, any suspects that were part of it were allowed to be arrested with no evidence. Hundreds were locked up right away, and making it impossible for the IRA to maintain the momentum of their campaign. And this is one of the bits as well that the Clancy Brothers had left out when they recorded their own version. This is tied in with the next verse, that the police are lackeys for war and never guardians of peace. Now on Wikipedia it mentions that this Guardians of Peace bit of the song, this is talking about the An Garda Síochána, because that's like the translation from the Irish to English. Guardians of Peace. But I'm not entirely sure of that. You let me know your thoughts down in the comments about it, because maybe I was reading it wrong. But surely I think it's talking about the RUC, as that's who Fergal and the IRA was kind of up against. That they're just there to make sure that the 6 counties stay in Britain's hands, and anyone who opposes them will be shot down essentially. They're not there to police things, they're just there as their own lackeys of war essentially. That's my view of this part anyway of the song. But I don't know where that reference to An Garda Síochána is coming from. Maybe it's like a comparison or something like that. Like An Garda Síochána are famous for being unarmed, except for the armed section of them, of course, right? But the police in Ireland are essentially unarmed, whilst the police force up the north, especially at the time, were heavily armed and militarised, carrying submachine guns on them, assault rifles, travelling around in armoured vehicles. But maybe it's the comparison between them, that the RUC weren't there to protect civilians. They weren't civilian peacekeepers, but militarised lackeys for war who were legitimate targets. But let me know what you think anyway. But the final verse, I did give it away at the beginning. I'm sorry about that. And if you've heard the song, you know what the ending is anyway. But Fergal O'Hanlon lies there, shot, dying. We know that the brief attack he took part in, he was part of the initial survivors who fled, and then he died when he was retreating. The song mentions him lying there, which really gives you more of an insight to the imagery of the song. Like, think about it. In the beginning, he is telling the rebels to come and listen. He is 16 years old, from Monaghan. And now it says that he's lying here, body full of holes. So the song is basically him telling us his story as he lies there dying in those brief moments. It changes it from the opening of imagining him sitting down, other young lads around him talking about the story, telling him a story about how he came to be here, to actually it's his final thoughts to himself about how it all came to this point, lying on the ground, dying and shot. But rather than regretting the sacrifice, his final thoughts are the traitors who bargained and sold, who betrayed the Republican cause, that he wishes that the rifle had have exacted the same revenge upon those traitors as theirs have inflicted upon him. The Quislings who sold out to the Patriot Game. Quislings here is a word for a traitor who collaborates with an enemy force occupying their country. It's hard not to empathise with Fergal O'Hanlon, and with many others as well who have fought and lost their lives throughout the years. It's hard not to feel the anger that Dominic wanted you to feel in listening to this song. It's a perfect song, linked with history and with a bit of controversy attached to it too. Do tell me what you think about it all. The Bob Dylan plagiarising bit, the Clancy Brothers changing the lyrics. Tell me your thoughts. But look, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. You can join the channel down below for access to a few Irish tune tutorials, as well as a members section on our Discord channel too, and a 10% discount off all products on the shop. Be sure to have a look when you can. A huge shout out to all the people who have supported the channel over the last year, and also a warm welcome to our new members, JMCH Smith, Erin Riggs 9240, Pat Nizer 1, and Stuart Richards. Glad to have yous all here, but look, I'm not going to keep yous much longer. I'll leave it at that. Thanks a million for watching, yous absolute legends. Yous have a great weekend. Slán go fóill. Cheers.